this evening. As already mentioned, I'm head of the Scoop, which is the news and current affairs output of Queen's Radio. And first off, I'm just going to introduce each of the panelists, and then we'll just dive straight into what hopefully will be an interesting and informative discussion for you all. So at the end here, Adam is currently studying history and politics at Queen's University. He's from the Ulster Unionist Party and is currently the secretary of the QUB Young Unionists. He regularly volunteers in the Ulster Unionist Party in the South Antrim constituency and has previously interned with Pure Mental NI. Then we've got Jamie Harper, who is a history and politics graduate from Queen's and current deputy chair of the Alliance Youth. Will Poland is a law and politics student and chair of QUB SDLP, as well as the party representative in the Strangford constituency. During his time in politics so far, Will has taken a particular focus on promoting integrated education and furthering the conversation for a truly anti-sectarian New Ireland. And then we have Conor Cinnamon, who is from Newry, has been a Sinn Féin activist since he was 16. He's a final year student studying Spanish and international relations, is a member of Newry Sinn Féin Officer Board and a former chairperson of Ogre Sinn Féin and OR. And then finally we have Grant Warren, who's a final year French and history student at Queen's and is also chair of the Democratic Unionist Association, the university branch of the DUP. So the first question I'm going to ask is, since the executive has been back up and running, we've seen executive members take part in cultural activities their respective parties wouldn't normally be associated with. Deputy First Minister Emma Little Pengelly has tried hurling, and First Minister Michelle O'Neill attended a Northern Ireland football match. To what extent can those gestures be seen as tokenistic, and how confident can we be that this executive is not just up and running, but is here to stay? And we'll start with you, Grant, and just go along if that's okay.
In relation to that, I think it's important. They are symbolic gestures, I must say, but they do mean a lot, because in a place where we effectively have a society of minorities, where we have a society where you have largely a unionist community, a nationalist Republican community, and then people who don't identify as having any constitutional aspiration, or they may have aspirations but don't identify as such. It's important, I think, to show that we're, in terms of moving forward and in terms of a spirit of cooperation, that these gestures are absolutely important. I think sometimes the commentary around them kind of trivializes them and makes them out to be a novelty, whereas I feel if even if you go back before 2020, that you did see these kind of gestures that have been reciprocated, and I do think it is a positive step forward in that regard.
Yeah, I agree, and I think some people may see them as tokenistic. I do think they're important. I think we need to realise that we're a society coming out of conflict. 26 years on from the Good Friday Agreement, people at a time would never have thought we would have had a peace process. So I think seeing those gestures mean a lot to people. It shows that people are up for dialogue, they're up for change, they're up for respect. I mean, some people might want a United Ireland, some people might want to stay within the Union. That's all grand, that's okay, that's healthy. But we can at least have a bit of respect for each other, our identity, our culture, our sport, whatever that might be. And I think that's the most important thing coming out of that.
Couldn't agree more. I think a lot of people may call it tokenistic, but I think that encouragement and respect for the tradition by taking part in something as simple as hurling. I was actually particularly impressed by by Emma's hurling skills. That's clearly someone who plays a good bit of hockey before as well. It was very impressive, but it is good to see, and it's encouragement for the future in the New Ireland we want to build, that there is the ability to reach out across that political divide and respect tradition and engage in that tradition as well and learn about it. That it's one of the things I think was mentioned in Spiel. I went to an integrated school, and engaging in different communities and learning about different communities was something that I was so glad I was able to do there as I was growing up. More and more people in our society at every level to be able to do that. But in terms of, is the executive here to stay? At the end of your question, that's one of the things that I kind of have a bit of a question mark over. The SDLP proposed reform measures in the Assembly that were turned down by the executive parties, apart from the Alliance Party, who we're glad to have support from, and the Ulster Unionist Party as well. But without those big two who have the power to take down the executive, we weren't able to get those reforms through. In my opinion, and I think in the opinion of a lot of people in Northern Ireland, by not reforming those institutions that were always meant to be reformed originally from the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, by leaving them unreformed, by leaving the ability to pull down the executive, in my opinion, what they are is making a situation of it's when will Stormont go, not if Stormont will go. And in my opinion, it's a weapon to bludgeon people with over a political message, whether that's the protocol, whether that's the Irish Language Act, or the actions of Arlene Foster and the RHI, which were unacceptable as well. All these are unacceptable in different communities and to different people. But pulling down the executive is never a good tactic about it. And those reforms have to be put through to ensure that we can say this executive is going to stay up and running. As long as the looming threat of a collapsed executive stands, we can't be confident that someone's going to be here. We can't just do this on a trust basis. It's got to be enshrined in law that we have a government that's working for people. We can't go back to what the last 2 years of on-off government has been. When we look at our healthcare service, our education service, and different public services, well, it would embarrass a third world country. So I think we need government here, we need the investment here, we need hard decisions taken by the executive, and we want to make those hard decisions with you as a constructive opposition, but we need to have the reassurance that government will be there. And then when we're in government, we can keep doing these things, like going to hurling matches and going to rugby matches and having those cross-community traditions as well. But having government there has to be the baseline, in my opinion. So I don't think we can say the executive is going to stay until we can confirm that.
Yeah, I completely agree with what everyone said. You know, at the end of the day, it is gestures like this that actually do make a difference. Whilst hurling might not mean a lot for someone from the English community, it does mean a lot for people that practice the sport from the nationalist community, and it's gesture politics like that actually makes a little bit of difference. It kind of makes more of a humanistic approach to things. At the end of the day, politics is for everyone, no matter your background. We could be GUP, MLA, but still you represent nationalists in your community and the constituency as well. You don't just represent one side of the community, and I think that's also very important. And just echoing what my friend beside me here from the SCFP said, at the end of the day, reform is needed. And, I've always championed that. At the end of the day, we don't identify as unionist or nationalist, we identify as other. And because of such, our vote when it comes to certain important topics means less, matters less. And I think if you want Stormont, which is, everyone wants Stormont up and going, if you want the executive up and going, champion issues that we all see day to day, we'd have to have that before there. It shouldn't just be pulled down because someone, doesn't agree with something. At the end of the day, the DP should be both toppled Stormont. They can argue, should be arguing for the Irish Language Act, you can argue for the Irish Sea Border, but at the end of the day, both toppled government, and, we're none the better for it, realistically. The issues, healthcare and so forth, it's a knock-on effect. So, we need to do that reform. We need to make sure that Stormont can't be toppled. We want to see the executive. It's better for everyone, no matter what side of the community they're from. And I think realistically, it's a conversation that people need to start championing for. And Leo Varadkar and Thomas Dunsouth as well. Martin, he also came out. They all said reform is needed. We have that discussion. And I think really we have that platform, we have that opportunity now to do that. I think realistically we need to have that hard conversation and include everyone. It doesn't matter if you're unionist, nationalist, other, everyone should be involved in that conversation. It's not to exclude anyone, it's nothing like that. It's so that this institution that we have and are so important for the day-to-day living in Northern Ireland still exist and they can't be toppled down. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I think I've agreed with them. Well, quite a lot of people like that have agreed with me. But I think just with politics, I've seen, which we've seen for myself and it's good for Northern Ireland. I think hopefully we'll see more people like our age and older that maybe get more involved in other things within the community, like learn about hurling or learn about GAA sports, because I don't know much about it. So I think that would be good to see, and that might help us be able to build relationships with the rest of other communities within Northern Ireland. And I suppose I think really to see if that is if the politics is working, just politics is working, is really to see for the next 5 years our executive up and running, and to see them actually working legislation to do with whether it be things over any unionist policies or national policies that maybe will be progress made in actual legislation. And I think we need to see that, and then when we see that, we can then say it's working. We have to see change on the ground, and not just high up in the First Minister and Deputy First Minister.
Okay, next I'm just going to talk about something which is particularly important for this panel, I think, which is diversity. And do you think, Stormont, and I suppose politics in Northern Ireland more generally, is diverse enough? How far would you say representation of women and the LGBT community, minority ethnic community, and how far does that go here? And could more be done? And what barriers do people from those backgrounds face going into politics? If we could start this end this time.
Yep. Well, I think more needs to be done for a more diverse setup. As you can see, a lot of us here, we're all just males, and that's not really. That's why it's good to get our views across. It would be good to get more wider range of views from women and maybe other minority groups. There's no ethnic minorities or anything. Views expressed, and like even within the assembly, there's no ethnic minority candidate. So I think there needs to be work done on that, and I think to do that we need to like overcome some of the challenges that we see that people can experience on social media. Like a lot of women MLAs have received abuse online, and I think that's not really that's not acceptable. And I think we have to be careful of the language that everybody's using and how that language could impact people and how they want to get involved.
Yeah. I think, when it comes to things such as diversity, the only way you can get people from diverse backgrounds in is if, you try and encourage them to do events like this, get young people engaged, and, someone who's from the LGBT community, it's great to see an openly gay MLAs and everything. With an openly gay minister and the executive, for example, it's great to see that, but there are other ways, make that more proactive, at the end of the day, issues that impact us all, there's issues that will directly impact people from, different races and so forth. And there's issues such as domestic abuse and so forth that impact women and also men, obviously, but women more so. And there's obviously efforts within the assembly to, champion that and to promote that. And whilst it's great with the deputy first minister and the first minister that's female, with females within the executive and stuff, there's more that we can do. At the end of the day, how are you going to try and get, for example, more women into politics, get more people from different backgrounds and minorities and stuff, is to actually talk about it, have discussions with people. At the end of the day, it's young people that really do change Northern Ireland, and how we can get young people involved is to actually have discussion groups like this, more social media posts, actually engage with people, actually listen to them, hear what their issues are. I think a lot of people see Stormont as somewhat removed from reality. And they don't really talk about issues that impact what young people see, mental health, and it's a real issue in Northern Ireland. And whilst there's groups, like Pure Member, for example, that champion and so forth, there's more that we can do. And obviously like abortion, and it's obviously within Northern Ireland, there's more discussions we can do about that, and within schools and everything like that. And I think it's realistic for politicians to come out to schools, come out and actually talk about the issues that impact young people. And obviously different people from different backgrounds and so forth, we can actually see a lot more people get more involved. I think what also often happens is that people are scared to get involved in politics. They're like, I'm from a minority, I might not be accepted. If you look at Stormont, it's very white, it's very male. How do we kind of challenge that is to try and, encourage people to be like, actually, these issues impact your community, how can we try and help them and so forth. So I think it's having those open discussions, trying to encourage people to be like, it's not scary to get involved in politics. And like I don't have much involvement with politics realistically. This is my first debate, but it's doing things like this, going out of your comfort zone, actually having those discussions. That's how we get people involved. So I think it's important that we also keep that in mind, stuff like that.
I couldn't really agree more. And when you look at the panel tonight, I think this is a pretty sad reflection of where our politics is in Northern Ireland as well, but across the Western world. I think when you look at the amount of ethnic minorities and different groups of minorities and women that are involved in politics, it is dangerously low, and that is a massive proportion of society that's not having its voice directly heard. There's no place for any of us in this panel right now to speak on the behalf of someone who is an ethnic minority or is a woman or is transgender or of any other minority grouping. I think I had a conversation recently. I was at a shared island like round table sort of thing, and someone asked me about barriers that I had faced getting into politics, and to be very honest, I found it almost insulting to come up with anything myself, because I think when you're a man in politics, it is incredibly a white man in politics. It is incredibly easy compared to being from an ethnic minority background or being a woman particularly, the social media abuse, the systematic misogyny and racism that exists within our institutions, that goes for every level, whether it's on the media, whether it's in our political institutions as well. It's horrifying. And if I was a woman and I was facing going into politics and wanting to do what I do now and what I really enjoy, I find the social media abuse alone near impossible to wade through to be to be promoted to go into politics. I think there's a job here, particularly for us, the political parties, as well as society as a whole, to play into encouraging young people from ethnic minority backgrounds and women to come and be politicians in our party, but also be activists in our party as well. And that's got to be standing up with them, not for them as well, not speaking on their behalf, but speaking with them. So if there is that social media abuse, make sure that you're not just saying to the troll that, well, this isn't fair because they're so and so, but instead promoting what they've said and saying that this is fantastic on a whole different platform, and not giving fuel to the fire of people who just simply are trolls, racist and misogynists and are pushing good people out of our politics. I can't say them it's good people. I've seen good politics because they just, and all of them are women or ethnic minorities, particularly that I've seen lead politics. So I think there's so much for the parties to do to make sure that we are promoting our comrades, that we're going into spaces that are maybe a little bit uncomfortable for our parties right now because of the makeup of them, and making sure that we're talking to people from different backgrounds and promoting them to go forward in politics, because we want their voice to be heard. We want to have black mayors, we want to have women in the executive, we want to have gay ministers as we have now LGBT ministers. This is fantastic, but it's only the tip of the iceberg, and this should have happened about 50, if not 60, 70, 100 years ago. So I'm happy to see things improving, but there's so much more the parties need to do, and us as candidates, and I think tonight there's nothing else that can really sell, and a sad reflection of where politics still kind of is. So there's plenty more to do. It's about making sure that you're building people up and making them feel supported in what is a very hate-filled system, and trying to change that system from the inside. And I know I'm trying my best, and we're all trying our best, I'm sure, on this panel in our political parties, but it's turning on and off.
That's it. Yeah, I think there has been progress made. I think it's a positive that 2 women lead the executive. Within the executive office, it's all women. I know in my own party, over half of Sinn Féin MLAs are women. We're led by 2 women. We've had our most successful election results under the leadership of 2 women. So we need women leadership because they're doing a great job, especially in Republican circles. But I think we do have to look at the barriers that face women. Misogyny, we live in a sexist world that prioritises the masculine over the feminism. It's within those institutions. I think a positive step is that the executive has endorsed as a priority a strategy to combat violence against women or girls. The north of Ireland is the most dangerous place in Europe to be a woman. That's the reality. It's wrong, and it should disgust every single person in this room. So that as a key priority is very welcome from the executive, and I've no doubt should be at the top of the agenda. I also want to touch upon the last mandate as well, when we've seen domestic abuse legislation. For the first time ever, coercive control was actually put into legislation as a form of domestic abuse. And I think that really shown the importance of working together, because that was an issue that really brought all parties in and showed that parties can work together, and the politics here can work within the institutions. In terms of the barriers, we'll have to call out misogyny. See those sexist jokes, misogynistic jokes, homophobic jokes, racist jokes, call them out, and we'll have to try to change behaviour. It could be a one-on-one conversation, but then it ends up into a wider societal kind of change as well. In terms of ethnic minorities, we see now the hate and the vitriol directed at ethnic minority, especially at immigration in the South. We're racists, and on one hand it's fair enough. You can criticise government policy and immigration and you're not racist, but there's people who are taking advantage of people's fears and concerns and whipping up hate, and those people need to be called out because it's wrong. So I think all of that, I think we need to call out racism, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia in all its forms. And in terms of barriers as well, I think we need to talk about working class people as well. I think too many of the time you'll sit and listen to people on the radio, on the media, and this all kind of have this similar, wider Belfast accent. No harm to everyone from Belfast, but it's not representative of the people of the north of Ireland. It's not representative of people who come from Newry or South Armagh or Fermanagh or Derry City. So I suppose it's about working class people, it's about trans people, it's about women as well, and we all need to do more, and it's all a personal responsibility and a collective responsibility from our parties.
Just like to broadly echo everything that's been said thus far. I think it's easy to focus on what are the obstacles for women and minority ethnic groups and trans people and the LGBTQIA plus community in terms of barriers into entry in politics. But we have to bear in mind that these are reflections of broader societal obstacles to representation. I know this is a very cliche thing, but you can't be what you can't see, basically. And, you know, here in Northern Ireland as a post-conflict society, I think we have a tendency of, well, we can't really get on with each other, so kind of other people, other voices, other views are kind of almost left in the kind of the rear view mirror. Sometimes we can't really, you know, take the time and the space. And I think it's about holding a space and hearing much more diverse perspectives and their lived realities in terms of that. Because I do think we do we can navel gaze an awful lot in terms of communities that just kind of focus on headline issues. While they're important at a political level, politics is only ever a microcosm of what wider society is. And particularly regarding female representation, I think obviously progress has been made, but you know it starts right at the grassroots level. If you look at terms of wider societal issues, domestic violence, I think with kind of the onward march of social media, that amplifies kind of issues in terms of misogyny and sexism that were always there. I think there's a tendency to think, oh well, social media, these things are only an issue now. They've always been there, but they're now almost translated from the private into the public sphere. And I think that has to be roundly condemned, and we have to make a collective effort across society to call that out and make sure that women's voices in those situations are heard and informed in relation to that. And I would say, in terms of my party, I will admit, even as you know, as a young working class unionist who comes from a council estate, for example, for me as a man, obviously my route into politics, you know, I did A-level politics was always an interest of mine. So of course I would have had a more ready insertion into general politics than, you know, for other underrepresented groups, of course. But even as a working class unionist, I feel that there's working class people in general, there are all sorts of assumptions and kind of labels foisted on them in terms of, well, you know, you mightn't go down the kind of grammar school educated, university degree routes, therefore you can't be articulate, you know, you can't access these positions. That just highlights the complexity of the problem, and I think just at every level we have to do more, and I would just echo in terms of the kind of collective action and stress. It is a wider societal problem, and not just to get too focused in the kind of political micro level of that.
Okay, so what I'm going to go and do now really is go into each of the political parties more specifically. So I'm going to start with the DUP grant. I think we'll have to touch on the elephant in the room. First of all, your party walked out of the executive in early 2022 over concerns about post-Brexit trading arrangements. On the 18th of January, thousands of public sector workers took 24-hour strike action, and that involved about 15,000 nurses, teachers and cleaners, making it the biggest day of strike action here in decades. What can you really say, what can your party really say to a nationalist looking on, seeing that strike action, crumbling public services, a dysfunctional government for 2 years? How is the DUP's position that Northern Ireland's existence as part of the UK is in its best interest and able to be sold in light of recent events?
We have to be careful not to conflate the headline constitutional question and constitutional issues, as deeply held as they are, with the kind of the day-to-day bread and butter issues that affect us all. I come very much from a working class community where you have nurses, where you have workers in the care sector, where you have people who worked right throughout the pandemic who are very much affected by these things, but their unionism in no way is diminished through that. And I think
there's not much support for the boycott then?
There is, I mean, across the working class unionist community, of course, there was support for, because it was deeply felt that there was an injustice as far as the Irish Sea border in terms of Northern Ireland having had that say in terms of redressing that balance to power sharing and still having a meaningful say over regulations that we didn't have a meaningful say on. And of course people will bring it back to Brexit and say, well, unionism as a majority supported Brexit. That's not the way democratic processes work. The Brexit result was the Brexit result. We can't keep relitigating the referendum, but yet these issues affect everyone in Northern Ireland. And to try and conflate, yes, the DUP walked out of Stormont, but the DUP has made hard-fought progress on those issues. We see, for example, with a more robust Stormont break in terms of the review of EU legislation and regulations, trade regulations, that will be implemented in Northern Ireland, we now have a statutory committee at Stormont that can review these legislations. We have an independent monitoring panel that will alert the Assembly for up to 4 months before new regulations come into force. We saw the other day, and I know other parties have described it as stunt politics, but in terms of so it's around the general designation of different regions. So, for example, if you have wine coming from a certain region of France, it has to be designated as champagne, for example, and this was a new EU regulation introduced last October. But we have no say over this, so I think it was right before rushing into accepting these regulations, for example, that the Assembly considers them rather than just accepting it as the default. And the people who say, for example, it's stunt politics, well, this was agreed in both the Windsor Framework and the Safeguarding of the Union deal. So if the alternative is that you don't support a broad measure of support for these issues, well, that's for other parties to answer in relation to that.
Does it bother you that those regulations all came about as a result of that Brexit result that you campaigned and your party campaigned in favour of?
I was
that
I was
Brexit
14 during the Brexit referendum. I have my own view on that. You know, we are where we are. I know Northern Ireland as a majority, 56% to 44 voted to remain within the European Union, but as a whole, jurisdictionally, the UK voted to leave the European Union, and it's about dealing with that situation as it is. Other parties fought to relitigate that. I don't think that would have been helpful. I don't think it would have respected the UK's decision to leave. But I think you have to deal with the issues at hand. I personally, I don't buy the argument that, you know, we can just reverse Brexit and this will all be okay. That's just other people's narrative. We have to deal with the issues at hand.
Okay, and can you see how your party leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, recently sharing platforms with the likes of Jim Allister and Jamie Bryson in opposition to the Irish Sea border may look contradictory, as they're now implying the Stormont boycott was pointless and that the Irish Sea border remains. Was Geoffrey Donaldson merely caving in to pressure from the British government?
I disagree with that, because if you look at the likes of Jim Allister, Jamie Bryce, and these unelected elements within unionism, while I respect their viewpoint and their viewpoint to be heard, many of the unionists share those views come from the type of working class communities I come from. I very much respect those viewpoints. But what is the difference between those and Sir Geoffrey Donaldson in 2022 and then the 2023 local elections? Geoffrey Donaldson received a mandate to go back to the British government and negotiate improvements to the trading arrangements, and has secured Northern Ireland's place in terms of the UK domestic legislation, in terms of the UK internal market, and has concrete results. Now, take, for example, that recent vote. People who are protesting the Irish Sea border still remains, for example. If the DUP hadn't went back into Stormont, unionists who simply ideologically opposed sharing and going back into Stormont, those regulations that they say is implementing the protocol would have automatically applied anyway. So I think unionism has to lead on this, and I think Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has demonstrated this since securing this Safeguarding Union deal, but leading from the front and about securing improvements. And I think there's very much more work to be done on the securing improvements from within Stormont, because voices on the sidelines who've repeatedly failed to secure electoral mandate. TUV came back with one seat with 65,000 votes in 2022 and something like 9 council seats in 2023. The DUP is very much the leading party of unionism and has a mandate to carry out what it has done. And I think we will see that anyone who said otherwise is pursuing a failed strategy.
Okay, so you referenced secured improvements there whilst Bannon government aiming to. How different is that from the Ulster Unionist Party's stance from the beginning, that they want to go back in and try and work through those issues?
If we just even go back to the original protocol, for example, so the original protocol was done on a majoritarian basis as far as voting down different articles of the original protocol. The Windsor Framework, while an improvement, didn't go far enough because it didn't secure the, in terms of improving on the democratic deficit inherent in the original protocol. So the original protocol stipulated it was a simple majority vote, but that wasn't acceptable because everything since the Good Friday Belfast Agreement has been done on the basis of cross-community consent. And a simple majority vote means a significant portion of our community here would feel that their aspirations in terms of their place within the UK is simply trampled on and ignored. So we saw through, people said that the UK government would never renegotiate with the EU. Back when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, when Liz Truss became Prime Minister, and when Rishi Sunak. And they went back and renegotiated in the form of the Windsor framework, and we've built upon that with the safeguarding of the union. If we'd listened to the likes of Doug Beattie, for example, while I respect Doug and I respect his viewpoint, I respectfully disagree on that. He simply abdicated responsibility for that, and I think the UK government would not have felt any incentive whatsoever to go back to the negotiating table had they seen the largest party of unionism simply willing to go in and operate the institutions.
Right, I'm going to move on then to Adam from the Young Unionists. In 2022, a group working to increase the number of women standing for election said the UUP must take responsibility for their lack of female representation at Stormont. Your party's decision to stand two candidates in Fermanagh and South Tyrone in 2022's Assembly election cost Rosemary Barton, and that was the party's only female MLA, her seat. How can we be confident that the UUP takes representation of women in politics seriously?
I think that at the council level, we have started bringing up women. We have very capable women at the council level. Bethany Barris, Leah Smith, Mary McWilliam, just to list a few. And we have women coming up in Young Unionists. We have women who have joined recently, who are 18, 19. And the hope is that we take them seriously and hope to get them involved in various aspects of our party. Such as getting into maybe positions of chair, maybe someday being able to come here and to speak here. And I'm sure there's some of them now that could easily come and do that. But we also have a women's group, which we take seriously, and they have representation on our executive and our party executives they do, and their voices. We take their voices seriously, and even our health minister is recently introducing things with getting thing done with abortion policies, and we're taking that seriously, discussing how you're taking that. But I think there's still a lot of work that has to be done. But we have Diane Armstrong who's running for an MP. So we do have that running. At our MLA level, it was disappointing about Rosemary Barton, so it was. But we ran the candidates together. But hopefully then at the next election we'll see some more. We had Julianne Corran, very capable candidates that are running. We run them in there as they want to run in. So I think next election we just have to next assembly election hopefully bring in some more women to take up that.
Can you give me a bit of an insight into, I suppose, why we haven't seen your party with a lot of female representation at the Stormont level yet? What do you think the issues were there?
Well, I think it is, if you go back to like ideas of sexism on social media, abuse, online, there's a lot of women are scared to come up and to go into higher levels of politics. We just need to, I think, maybe development some strategies. I know we are going to have the Young Unionists AGMs going to come up, so I think discussions around developing strategies to get more women involved in Young Unionists level. I think that is something that I think is going to be discussed. Hopefully something that maybe I can help them do. As we're going to have our elections for committee roles for the Young Unionists.
Right, I'm just going to move on now to the issue of unionist unity and to touch on unionism's recent electoral performance. 2023's council election saw Sinn Féin become the largest party in local government with 144 seats, as opposed to the largest unionist party, the DUP's 122. Whilst at the previous year's assembly election, Michelle O'Neill became First Minister designate. Are smaller unionist parties such as yourselves and the TUV merely splintering the unionist vote in different directions at the expense of unionism's place at the top of Northern Irish politics?
Well, I think on like the importance of, it would be good to see a unionist party be the largest, but I don't think that's necessarily the main focus on strengthening unionism. I think if we have a wide range of parties, well, I'd support two parties, but like the unionist realignment mentioned by Mike Nesbitt was something that I think immediately needs to happen. But I think it's good to have a smaller party that maybe offers a different view on some things, such as the ones over the football stuff and bringing down Stormont. I think that was disgrace for it to happen, and I think it was I think there was a lot of other everyday issues that needed to be worked on during that time that weren't. So I think ideas like that, we need different opinions and two different parties to give the unionist electorate a choice. And if the idea of unity into a party is something that, well, is the aim, I don't think that should be an aim. But I think there is areas, however, where we should work together. And I think we can do that. We did that just this week with the vote on the EU regulation, and we voted together on that. So I think there is areas where we can work together, but like unifying one party, no, and unity in the general elections, such as election pacts, that really spoken out against election pacts. So that's been so I think that we shouldn't be doing pacts, but I do agree with me. He's talked about maybe some agreement in some areas not to stand, but we're not calling them pacts. Is maybe what the idea we're going with, but that would be my view on unity.
So you think there being a wider choice for unionists as to which strand to vote for is more of a priority than actually achieving a unionist first minister?
Yes, I think so, because I think long term for unionism, if we keep the diverse choice, we actually grow unionism by attracting more middle ground for people who maybe who have a choice then to vote for a more moderate party, which I'd say you would be more moderate in unionism than say the TUV and the DUP. So I think that it grows unionism by having different parties.
Okay, and Connor, I'm going to move on to Sinn Féin then. And first off, I just wanted to touch on your party's criticism of the DUP storm and boycott. Obviously over the Irish Sea border, as already discussed. Whilst your party had previously boycotted the same institution over the renewable heat incentive and Irish language. In light of that, was your party criticising the DUP really for something your party had done previously?
Well, I think to take everyone back to the time where Stormont fell in 2017 was because of the RHI scandal. There is no government in the world that would have survived the financial scandal that Arlene Foster headed up. She then refused to step aside for a public inquiry, which was fair to get to the truth, and that's how the institutions came down. No government in the world would have survived that. We had a deal 10 months after, but the DUP couldn't sell it to their base. We had a deal on Irish language, we had a deal on equality, we had a deal on rights. If we go back to the Good Friday Agreement, we can only govern in parity of esteem, with respect. It comes down to what we were talking about at the start, and the DUP weren't there at that moment. It then got to a point in 2020 where we could go in again, and we came to an agreement. So I don't think it is. I think we weren't there because the foundations weren't right. We can only govern. This place only works when we work together, in partnership, in respect. That's respect for our identities, our language, our cultures. And that's where we're at now, and that's why now we need to work together and tackle those big issues in public services. So no, I don't.
Are you saying that invalidating the Unionists' party's concerns over the Irish Sea border if you're saying that Sinn Féin could walk out for their own reasons?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying we walked out for our own reasons. Government collapsed because of a public financial scandal where people's money literally went up in smoke in a renewable heating incentive. And I'm not saying that about unionist concerns. Unionists have concerns and they need to be navigated, and I'm sure unionist parties will be doing that as well. But what did happen for the last near 2 years before Stormont came back was no government, and that really impacted on public services, which are already being decimated by Tory austerity. The Tories, when the executive came back, have already admitted that this place is underfunded, and that then with the lack of decision making from ministers obviously worsened that as well in terms of health, on waiting lists, on GP services, and education, with the cost of living which is crippling everything. Of course, then the Tories tanked our mortgages, so people's mortgages shot up as well. So all of this was going on, and yet there was no executive. And the DUP were sharing platforms with Jamie Bryson and Jim Allister when people were struggling to heat their homes. That's the reality, and that's the reality. And we're talking about working class communities. That's what working class communities were forced into hating or eating, and that was absolutely wrong. But we are where we are at the minute. We're in government, and now the priorities need to be on health and education, the cost of living, and all those issues.
Okay, so I'm just going to then talk about where we're at the minute. When the executive then got back up and running, Mary Lou McDonald commented that a united Ireland is within touching distance, whilst at the same time, a recent Lucid Talk poll showed that more people would vote for Northern Ireland to remain part of the UK if a border poll was held now. And that was 49% showed in favour of staying in the UK, with 39% choosing Irish unity. Was that a realistic statement on the part of the political leader?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, as Michelle O'Neill said, I think we're in the decade of opportunity. I think we can have a conversation about Irish unity and govern at the same time. We can work power sharing arrangements as well. This conversation is live. People are talking about it. When they see the problems within our health service, when they see in terms of education, when they see at the minute we have 2 health services, 2 education services, public services are duplicated. Life expectancy, for example, in the south is longer as well. So it is realistic. I think it's foolish if we don't have that conversation. It's foolish if we don't plan. It's foolish if we don't prepare. But we can do all that. We can have those conversations, which of course must be inclusive. They must be diverse. They must respect people as well. But at the same time, power share as well. I think they're both equally as important. And I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice, because we all know what it's like to have a referendum that nobody plans for, that nobody prepares for. We've had it with Brexit, and we're still dealing with the absolute havoc and chaos that's come out of that. But at the core of this, in terms of unity, is that the Southern government must now plan and prepare. And that starts with citizens' assemblies. It starts with a green paper. Tell people what it's going to be like. Let's set a date. Give it 7 or 8 years, and let's plan in the interim. Let's talk about health. Let's talk about education. Let's talk about healthcare. And climate change and all those issues that matter so much to people, and how as we as one island can work together constructively. If you're British, if you're Irish, if you're any of the nationalities that call this place home, let's come together and talk about that.
Can you see how there's a difference between, as you said, making preparations, planning, and saying that it is within touching distance before those preparations have been made?
Well, Mary Lou McDonald's a Republican. She's going to advocate for Irish unity. She's going to say she wants unity at the early possible time. We're not looking for it tomorrow morning. As I said, we have to plan and prepare. And anyone serious about a border poll, anyone serious about reunifying Ireland, knows that we need that time. We need those conversations, because we're not there just yet. But Mary Lou McDonald's right. This is the decade of opportunity. Let's get on with it. Let's deliver a change for people. Let's unite Ireland, and let's say the people that live in this island are big enough and bold enough to get on with the issues that matter to us, because we understand them and we live through them every day. We don't need any Tory in London dictating to us what we can or can't have, or impacting on our budgets or on our quality of life. Mary Lou McDonald was doing her job as being a political leader by actually putting forward that vision, putting forward that hope for people, that people can have a better life.
Okay, I'm just going to touch then on the recent St Patrick's Day celebrations. Mary Lou McDonald and Michelle O'Neill joined those at the White House. They said they did so in pursuit of peace. A former head of the Palestine General Delegation to Ireland said the party's decision was wrong because President Biden was supporting Israeli genocide. How does your party justify their pro-Palestinian stance and attend that celebration at the same time?
The key to this is dialogue. At the minute, Israel acts with impunity. Israel is a rogue, apartheid, terrorist state that is committing genocide against the Palestinian people. But what we need to do now, and what all political leaders need to do, is act for a ceasefire, is work together for a ceasefire. That has to be the priority. Saving Palestinian lives is a priority. And Michelle O'Neill and Mary Lou McDonald made clear that Sinn Féin will take any platform, any opportunity to raise the plight of the Palestinian people. And if we have to go to Joe Biden and tell it to his face, then that's exactly what we'll do. We had that opportunity, and that's exactly what they've done. It would be an abdication of responsibility to have that opportunity and to say to Joe Biden, we really appreciate the Americans' involvement within our own peace process. Now you need to go do that in Palestine. You need to stop arming Israeli, the assault, or the Israeli assault on Palestinian people. That's at the core of that. I mean, to stop wars, you talk to people, and that's talking to people you don't like. That's sitting down. We know that in our own situation as well. You have to sit down with people you don't like. You have to talk. And for us, we said to Joe Biden to his face that the genocide of the Palestinian people must stop and has to stop now.
Could boycotting that event, though, have made a stronger statement as a pro-Palestinian stance, could that make a stronger statement?
Well, I sympathise with people who were calling for a boycott, and I understand their fears and I understand their concerns. But boycotting that wouldn't have saved one Palestinian life. I mean, that at its core, when you can go and you can tell Joe Biden to his face, you can tell his administration that Ireland is so deeply disgusted and disappointed in you for arming Israeli genocide, for arming Israel's regime against an impoverished population. We're talking about people hemmed into the area of County and half the size of County Louth. This is what we're talking about now. So the boycott wouldn't have saved one life. And the people asking for a boycott, don't ask us to boycott Rishi Sunak, who's equally funding him. Don't ask us to boycott the EU institutions when we have Ursula von der Leyen saying that the people of the EU stand with Israel. I mean, absolutely nonsensical stuff, especially when the connections from Ireland to Palestine run so deep, because their story is our story. We know occupation, we know dispossession, we know everything that's going on there happened here. We now see hunger and starvation. We've seen sexual assault in the past from photos coming out used against Palestinians. And what we did, and what Mary Lou McDonald did, and Michelle O'Neill is said, and went to Joe Biden's face and said, we have to stop, we need a ceasefire, we need all-inclusive peace talks that actually leads to the creation of a Palestinian state for the Palestinian people. And we used our platform, and we will continue to do it in the future.
Okay, well, I'm going to come to you next then. The SDLP had what could be described as a harrowing assembly election in 2022, and they were down 4 seats, standing 8 seats in total. In writing about that election, RTE commented that it seems Liberal nationalist voters had either defected to Alliance or decided to punish Unionists for their political intransigence by voting Sinn Féin. Is there really a market for the SDLP within Northern Ireland's elected politics, or are they merely now caught between Alliance and Sinn Féin?
I think more so than ever, there's actually a need for an SDLP in our politics, to be honest. Sorry, I think that when you look at what the SDLP kind of stands for, that centre-left, nationalist, Labour voice in our politics, if there wasn't an SDLP there taking up that block of votes, you'd have to invent one. We're completely unique between those two different parties that you described, who are perhaps, and particularly in that election, took our votes that we held beforehand. You know, when it comes to that election, the big message was nationalists were told that they couldn't be First Minister. And like, I don't know if you've ever told a nationalist they can't have a job before, but you get a strong reaction from that. And, you know, it was hard myself even to walk through the polling station and be told by unionists that you're not going to be in the First Minister just because of your constitutional ambition. You're voted Sinn Féin myself. But, you know, it was the history-making vote at the time. That moment's gone. And I think we're already seeing that as the campaign gears up for Westminster. We are in that position. We're seeing that First Minister finally governing, a nationalist First Minister governing. But when you look at the SDLP and the unique position we hold, I think it's going to be unique within this decade of opportunities we talked about. The decade, I think, is going to be about constitutional change, no matter which way you believe that will be. I think the SDLP is a very unique space. There's a job for Sinn Féin, I think, to talk particularly to the devout, to the nationalists who are already there, get them out to vote, get them conversation going as well as ourselves, and talk about the logistics of it, the health service, and hopefully if they're in the Republic, the government in the Republic, they can also put pressure on themselves as well to put forward the likes of a Citizens' Assembly. That would be fantastic. And then on the other side, the Alliance seem to be abdicating out of the debate altogether, which I think is bonkers, but it's their decision. It's maybe just not electorally comfortable right now. I think the SDLP has the ability that Sinn Féin just doesn't have, which is just no slagging to them. It's just history to reach into communities where they can't. It's communities that trust us, as shown by the most transfer-friendly party in the north. We can reach in, have genuine conversations about hopes and fears and concerns. And we're seeing that through our New Ireland Commission and the workshops we hold on even the Shankill Road or down down Patrick. It doesn't matter what kind of background you're talking about. We're having those conversations and talking to people about it. So I think if there wasn't an SDLP in our politics, I think it would be a much worse place, particularly now as we take up opposition and we are holding ministers' feet to the fire on it as well. And we are seeing a little bit more pressure than we've seen before on ministers. I think that is going to create good governance as well. And I think I touched on it earlier there as well, by being the most transfer-friendly party, I think people have a trust in the SDLP that they don't have in other parties that aren't particularly their own, that they already vote for, and I think that we're a moderate voice in the room that can really bring people around the table in that kind of way. So I think while it was a rough election, we had a rough council election after as well, and there's no There's no coming away from this sort of thing. The circumstances just weren't good for us. We can see already, and I'm hearing them doors. It was like camps earlier this afternoon. The conversation has changed, that has changed, and I think basically SDLP in this decade of constitutional change as well, having those conversations is absolutely fundamental to going forward.
Transfer friendly, can you see though how nationalist voters might see Sinn Féin as a stronger voice for nationalism, especially with the recent surge?
I mean, whether they're stronger voice or not, we can debate, but that's a very subjective thing. But for me, I think that the SDLP voice is just as important in the conversation for constitutional change as I touched on before. Sinn Féin have to reach out to that nationalist base that currently exists, the base that vote for them, the base that believes in a United Ireland. The job of the SDLP is to nation build. It's to make sure that there is no way we can welcome unionists into a new United Ireland. It's impossible. This is their home, and we have to make sure that people feel comfortable and that they're included in that conversation. And not just unionists, but that growing, legitimate other community that has been, let down by their political representation, in my opinion, by having their voice left out of this conversation. The SDLP has stepped in and reached out to that community in a way other parties can't or won't. And I think, debating whether one voice is stronger than another, I think it's just as important in the conversation in building what I see as not just adding 6 counties onto the Republic, but a brand new country that can generate work for all. The likes of healthcare and education, the way we do government, and I touched on reform as well, and whether we have a devolved state in the north, or how we handle all these different things, the cultures and identity this place is teeming with. How we handle all that, I think the SDLP is so fundamental in reaching out across that divide in a way other parties can't, and other parties who are on that divide refuse to.
As you previously touched on, the SDLP have chosen to go into opposition rather than the executive itself. Recently, MLAs voted by 47 to 33 to reject the SDLP's motion, which called for an apology for the suspension of Stormont over the past 10 years and for a commitment to prevent it from ever happening again. I suppose, similar to the previous question, is your party in that opposition position being overlooked by larger parties?
I think that vote was pretty harrowing to see, where I really thought that parties were going to do the right thing and promise to keep governance here. I think when we see all the way from 2017 onward, from collapses before that, our public services just can't take another collapse. And I think if genuinely our institutions go down this time, I'd be afraid that they're not going to come back this time. I found it really disheartening that parties really couldn't take responsibility for their own actions and what they've done to this place in terms of our public services. I don't think we're being ignored. I think actually the SDLP are being very constructive. I think we're working with the executive on things we can, but we're also pushing them and making them a little bit more outside of their comfort zone than they'd have to be in the past, and that's a positive thing for politics. We were the only opposition for a very long time who were fighting for our government to actually get up and running, and we want to keep it that way. We don't want to pull government down. We want them to be working the best that they can, and I think that we're having lots of different conversations. On those opposition days, actually, which we use reform for our first one, absolutely fundamental in making the executive have conversations that they're uncomfortable about having, pushing that Overton window of politics that we have here to just a little bit outside its comfort zone, particularly on reform there in the first one, to make sure that we can get parties moving on past the staleness of our politics. But I again was very, very disappointed to see parties not take responsibility for that and not agree to what are, in my opinion, very, very moderate reforms. We weren't asking to click your fingers and change government today. We were asking for review committees. We were asking for a slow process that takes into consideration the views of all the parties and communities and how we reform it and what we end up with in the end. It was a long-term project. It was realistic. It's where we need to go. It's where the GFA was envisioned to go. By turning that down, all I see is two parties, DP and Sinn Féin, holding an axe over the people of Northern Ireland, just waiting for the next constitutional crisis in their eyes, and they'll collapse it again. And again, like I said at the start, I really, really worry the expiry date is coming up on it if we have another collapse. So I really hope that parties like the Alliance who are in the executive are pushing that to their partners in the executive, and that we are going to hopefully see movement on this, because again, it was a very, very shameful day for our politics.
If the SDLP's motions continue to be voted down, how much progress is actually going to be made there, and how effective do you think your opposition can be?
Well, I think the opposition days don't just define what opposition is. Opposition goes from right across government, goes from our scrutiny in committee, their scrutiny on bills from the executive and private members' bills, and it allows us that extra speaking time and a little bit more freedom within the chamber to voice the opinions of people in Northern Ireland who in my opinion, aren't being voiced within the executive right now. I think those opposite days, though, are we highlight. I think they're a very good way of pushing outside of what the executive are currently planning for. I'm hoping we're not going to see many more defeats on what I think are the priorities of people in Northern Ireland. And I think that reform one was a particular priority. There's, I've seen this executive claim that their day one priority is about 7 different things at this point. We have to start making movements. We were talking about it earlier, this gesture politics and going out and going to the police graduations and playing the hurling and going to the rugby. This is fantastic, and I love to see it because it really is showing respect for tradition and cultures. But at the same time, what has the executive done so far? I'm not asking for a lot, but I'm asking for a fairer pay rise than what further education staff have recently received, what nurses have received. This is all below inflation. We need to be realistic about this. We need also our executive parties to be realistic on revenue raising as well, and not just claim that they don't want to do it because it's not politically convenient for them. It kind of puts me in the fear of if they don't do it quick enough, they'll just collapse it again. And now we know that's something that they want to keep in place. So, I think a lot of people in Northern Ireland will take comfort in that the SDLG is pushing the executive in a little bit more of an uncomfortable position than it's been in before. And I think that, whether they're defeated or not, it's not just about motions on an opposition day. It's about bills, it's about amendments, it's about having hard conversations, and we've been hitting hard already. We've been hitting the ground running, to be honest, as well. And as chair of the Finance Committee and the Public Accounts Committee, we've also been making sure that the scrutiny's high, and that's what opposition's all about for us anyway.
Okay, Jamie, I'm just going to move on to you there. Is the Alliance surge over? Put simply, in 2023 elections, your party struggled to pick up votes west of the ban. As Alliance, a similar message to Sinn Féin of getting back to work on DUP's part seemed to be swallowed up by the larger rival, while there were losses in Darren Strabane. Has Alliance peaked, I suppose?
I'll answer this in 2 parts. I guess for someone who's from West Tyrone, who's involved with the Alliance out there as well as my local branch up here in South Belfast, I can see going through the doors in Tyrone, especially somewhere where many people see Tyrone as a very nationalist heartland. You do actually have conversations with people, and I think a lot more people are actually seeing the moderate brand Alliance and getting the name out in Alliance, and it's all very much about brand awareness. West of the band, people always view Alliance as it's very much a Belfast party. We don't really know much about it, but I think in recent years, people actually are like, for example, if you look at Naomi when she's on TV and stuff, people actually, she talks a lot of sense. What she's talking about actually, it matters to me. Whereby the rest of the parties, the main parties, DUP and Sinn Féin, they just seem like they're going at each other. I think people are very sick of that, very much aggressive politics. And I think hearing moderate voices that talk sense, it's actually refreshing for some people. Going through the doors, like I said, west of the band, you do see that kind of movement. Obviously, Derry in that recent election was upset to see, and obviously there's going to be changes there to make sure that doesn't occur again. But as a little party, we're always growing. We're always, seeing like the Lions Youth, for example, it's doing well, and it's growing as well. Seeing young people get involved, more diverse, people from different backgrounds getting more involved, LGBTQ, racial backgrounds, and so forth, and seeing more women get more involved. I go out indoors. And it's great to see big people I campus with are from different backgrounds and stuff. It's great seeing them actually getting engaged. People, who have came over, they've immigrated over, they've only maybe here, maybe a year or two, and it's actually, I want to get involved in politics. I'm actually interested. I want to actually, help out and stuff. And it's actually seeing people like that. I mean, when people open the door and it's someone who's, isn't white and does have a Northern Irish accent, it's actually refreshing to have that conversation with people from different backgrounds. And that's why we kind of, as a party, you grow. It's having that kind of refreshing approach and always sense talk about the matters that actually matter, not the constitutional issues that, whilst for certain backgrounds they're important, unionists obviously want to stay in the UK, nationalists want to stay or have a united Ireland, having that, actually is issues about health, education, pay rises, and the roads, infrastructure, the internet. Talking about stuff that matters for every day in Northern Ireland, talk about the here and now. That's what people want to talk about, and that's why I see those.
Why do you think it has traditionally struggled west of the ban?
I think really when you go west of the band, not to jump everyone in the same kind of bandwagon and stuff, but there's a lot of agriculture and stuff, and I think Alliance has traditionally been that very much Belfast based, always talking about Belfast and the infrastructure there. And obviously, as the years progress and stuff, we have obviously changed the narrative, and as having, candidates west of the band, having people, local people from for example, Stephen Donnelly and Limerick, and having local people and actually people that they recognise and having and hearing an accent that isn't from Belfast. It's kind of that's how we are obviously changing the narrative and stuff, but it is obviously something we're working on, and it's also something we want to improve on. And like personally, I've seen it improve, especially in recent years, and it's obviously something perfect. Always going to change and make adaptations where needed. But yeah, like I have struggled, and it's sad to see, but it is definitely doing better, and I've definitely seen it.
Right, just finally then, your party leader, Naomi Long, refuses to be drawn on whether she supports the Irish government's legal action against the UK over the Legacy Act, despite voices from within the party, such as Upper Ban MLA Owen Tennyson saying Dublin's actions were sadly necessary, and North Down MP Stephen Farry saying the case now needs to be addressed as a matter of international law. Are we looking at an alliance party that's divided in the face of what is one of the most emotive issues in Northern Ireland?
That's a good question. I don't think we're divided. I think obviously, like any party, there's different opinions and different views within. And I think that's also very healthy within a party to have those different opinions within. Now, obviously, I'll have an opinion on it.
Even on such a huge
I think
issue.
once it's a huge issue, it's healthy to have that kind of debate within. There's obviously going to be people who have different views from Owen and Stephen and so forth. And as a party leader, you are speaking on behalf of the party, and you have to have those discussions within the party first. I think it's important, that you just don't go off on a whim and you say something, because at the end of the day, Alliance is very much known for having a healthy debate and then making sure that's inclusive and everyone's views are included in it. Personally, if we want my own opinion on the matter, I think the legacy and Dublin's actions within it, I would agree with what Dublin's doing. I think when you sit down and look at it, I think the UK can act unilaterally. But that's obviously my opinion on it. I think people need to be held account, and especially when it's things such as the Trumpets, which is so sensitive, that you need to have that open discussion, and you need to have a healthy discussion around that. You can't act unilaterally and just try and brush it under the carpet. That's not how we do things.
But finally, and speaking of divide within the party, do you think Alliance would struggle to sell a narrative in the face of a border poll? Do you think that would maybe create divide within it?
I think what differentiates Alliance from other parties is that we are neither unionist or nationalist. We are very much other. And obviously, when it comes to a party that doesn't designate as either, there's going to be some people within the party that's obviously supporting Ireland. There's people that support staying within the UK, and it's that healthy debate. Obviously, when the time comes to it, there will obviously be more further discussions about it. There'll be more debates about it, and there'll be a consensus made. And that's something that we will obviously come to. But it's healthy. I think people within Alliance, they don't get caught up in the constitutional issues. They actually care about the here and now. And that's what kind of makes us a little bit different, that we don't get caught up in these things, these tribal matters. We actually care about the healthcare, the education issues that face everyone every day. And that's what kind of is the most important thing. It's not getting caught up in constitutional issues. What's important, it shouldn't be the main part of it.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm just going to go to if anybody in the audience has any questions now, you can shout away. Yeah, here.
Yeah, it was just reference to the board. It was briefly mentioned by we've seen that actually we're in favour to see reform occurred. Belfast Good Friday Agreement institutions. We've seen in 2024 as well. I think ever since the government has been restored, that it's actually become much more of a topical position and much more topical sort of conversation to have. So I was just wanting to know yourselves and for your party's position on reform, and whether or not we should stay to prevent the collapse of the executive as we have seen from both of your parties. Yeah, we're up for reform, we're up for discussions, we're up for the conversation. Let's have it. We've never shied away from that. We were always open towards it as well, in terms of whatever kind of negotiations Act 1 or whatever changes. What we would say is it has to be inclusive and has to be representative of all. But we're certainly up for it. Let's have the conversation, let's have the discussion, and we'd be there with others.
In relation to structures, it's easy enough to talk about structures. You'd do this, you'd move to voluntary coalition, you'd abolish the kind of the designation system, the weighted majority voting, all that. It's easy enough to have those proposals on the table and say implement them now, as I think particularly the SDLP and the Alliance Party have been very vocal in terms of pushing those kind of changes. But I would say from my point of view, certainly the DP's point of view, it is an aspiration in the DP's 2022 Assembly Manifesto to see, as politics here matures, to move to more voluntary structures, including, for example, moving to a system of weighted majority votes and kind of as politics here matures. But I think one of the most important things here is political will. Right? The structures can be whatever you want, but without the political will to operate that, there's no chance. There's no chance to work. A voluntary coalition moves the, shall we say, the unwilling aspect within the so-called ugly scaffolding of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement to a purely voluntary aspect. Now, I think in the Republic, for example, as we've seen, with kind of changing electoral patterns there, you've had a system where Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have been the two main parties for the longest period of time. And they've seen a challenge to their kind of established position as the lead parties from Sinn Féin, for example. And Sinn Féin came out as the largest party in the 2020 Irish general election. But what they formed a coalition, two parties who've for so long fought civil war politics basically between each other with the support of the Greens. And it becomes a numbers game then. And I think, as I certainly a discussion that I think parties have to be up for, but I think to suggest that we're right now in a position to move to that, I think is slightly premature position to hold. And I think as we're just getting the Assembly and Executive up and running again, and I think it takes political will to take those tough decisions. And I think in the interest of stability, it takes political will to operate the institution no matter what the structures are. So that's what I would say. Open to the conversation, but I think we need to see a greater maturity over time and the kind of normalization of our democratic process.
Jump in on that actually, just
Briefly.
very briefly.
Conscious of time.
Really uplifted to hear that both parties are at least interested in reform, and particularly Sinn Féin want to have that conversation. But where not to have that conversation within our ad hoc committee within our institutions itself? That's what was proposed in the day, and it was vigorously opposed by by Sinn Féin and the DUP together. I mean, the motion was collapsed. These are the places to talk about changing our politics is within our institutions. We all believe in them. We believe in fair and just debate in our institutions. And that was a serious consideration of it. So what I'd love to see now, if this is the opinion of Sinn Féin and the DUP as well, if they want to have this conversation, is the executive push to have this done as well, and to push for what, we're happy to lend you the word, push for what the SDLP was asking for only a couple of weeks ago, because that is the best place to have a conversation about how we reform this constitution within or this institution within our institutions themselves, within an ad hoc committee, with our politicians who represent the people there around the table, talking about different ways that we can reform it. We were never going to ask for it to click our fingers and change politics here on a whim and all of a sudden it's a voluntary coalition. It was going to be a long process of consideration of feelings and the electorate's position through their elected representatives. That's very much what I thought I was hearing there as well. So I'd love to see that hopefully come from the executive in the next few months.
Just to come in back in on what Will said there. In terms of these kind of changes that are proposed, these would be the most radical, far-reaching changes to the original text of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement since 1998. Of course, there's changes to St Andrews, changes in the with the Hillsborough Agreement, the Fresh Start Agreement. Of course, it's been changed, but this is a fundamental proposition to move to a different type of power sharing. So to do that, the question is, how do you get the democratic accountability for that? Is it a case where it's a multi-party talk system? Do you get the two governments together? Do you get the British government and the Irish government together and they agree it over the party's heads? Do you create a committee as well as suggested, or do you put it to a referendum? There's all these different questions about how to get the democratic mandate to do something like that, and I think again it's a more complex question than saying we'll decide this amongst each other and to try and I think one thing that might erode trust in politicians more is, as criticism has been levelled at two parties, is more carve-up and more decision amongst themselves.
Yeah, there.
The DUP has a range of views amongst its membership. The party position on abortion is pretty clear. The DUP is a pro-life party. It's anti-assisted dying. It supports life as far as believes both lives matter in relation to that. That's the public party position. People will have their views on that, but the legislation as it exists is a legislation that exists. The DUP, should things come to the Assembly floor, will seek to take a pro-life position on that. But again, I think people adopt this mentality of, oh, this is backward mentality, this is progressive mentality. It's not. The simple fact is we're a society where people have deeply held views. I know people who are members of parties which take a publicly pro-choice position, for example, but they're elected representatives when they have a deeply held conscious position on these issues. So to suggest that this is a particular problem with the DUP, that's fair enough. People can take their views on that, and the DUP may not be the party for people, but I think that represents a significant portion of the electorate in terms of their views, and it's there's a diversity of views in all parties on this, and you know as things progress, you know, you can make up your own mind as far as that. But I'm not going to try and make a case of trying to convince you to denounce the DP's position, because it's a position of conviction. Other parties have conscious positions or explicitly pro-choice positions in relation to that. But I can only outline the party's position as it stands.
Yeah, right at the back.
There's a lot of talk about football decisions. This Monday. Now, on the track record of the executive platform in 2015, this would consider which we were discussed. That was abdicated by the executive that couldn't make good decisions. What hope is there now? I asked this question before. What hope is there for people to watch the little economies to do? And the track record shows different decisions that cannot be made for particularly in the last given the best thing to do. What guarantees that the government can make these decisions?
Is that for anybody specifically or just?
There's a lot of talk about will we take responsibility, but we can't put into action. Exactly the point there's an opposition.
I'd love to jump first, particularly opposition mentioned there. I think it's shocking so far that the executive, yes, it hasn't been back in a long time, but not a single tough decision really has been taken. Any decision has been taken very poorly, in my opinion. I'm talking particularly in reference there to pay rises for public sector workers. I think it's not enough, it's below inflation, it's not good enough, and it's because of that, there's a reason because of that, is because they won't take the tough decision in another way, revenue raise. They're going to start chasing themselves in circles, waiting for more money to come from London or Dublin. And I really hope that more money comes from London and Dublin so we can invest that in our society and make it a better place. And see the executives do that. The executives to do that as well. But we have to take tough decisions. And I want to know what it is, because I think all the executive parties, or at least the DUP and Sinn Féin, have ruled out the rates rises. They've ruled out water charges. They've ruled out a rise in tuition fees. So I want to know what is their plan ourselves, and we're pushing them to find out what that is, where that money's coming from, because we can't just lump it all into one there as well. We can't just put a 15% rate rise on absolutely everyone, because then that's going to be unfair, particularly on working people. What we need to do is find out a different way that we can revenue raise here in Northern Ireland. We need to think outside of the box within the restrictions that we have, unfortunately, been given with devolution, and we need to look at the different ways and take them seriously so that we can give the public sector a good, fair pay rise and a fair funding for the institutions themselves that isn't just insulting below inflation levels. So I agree with you, and the SDLP as an opposition is fighting to make sure that they are going to take tough decisions. I think ministers are starting to feel more heat than obviously when there wasn't an opposition before, and I think they're a bit more flustered by the SDLP being in that position than I expected them to be as well, and that's I'm buzzing to see that, because it just means that our ministers will start to work, I think, hopefully, in the coming months, who has a bit of accountability behind it.
Yeah, you talk about the funding gap, and it comes down to the British government has conceded this place is underfunded, that we don't get enough money for our public services. They've actually said that. It's not too often a British government will come out and tell you what they've done wrong, especially when we look at the legacy bill and we look at all their other legislation and any type of kind of attitude or laws or decisions they make towards the north here. But what has to be done now is that has to be put on sustainable footing. All parties agree that that hasn't happened at the minute. So it is up to the British government to then put the money into the executive account, and then you can move forward in terms of pay rises and stuff as well. In terms of tough decisions, I hear this phrase a lot about tough decisions, and in some way I hear it on political shows as well about tough decisions and making tough decisions, but really that's just dressed up decisions that you have to put more charges on people for public services, or that you have to raise student fees. I hear that one a lot as well, which we in Sinn Féin will not do, because that's not the way we do things. We don't lump more charges on people for substandard public services in terms of the regional rate as well. The British government has conceded that they've underfunded this place, and it's time for them to choke up the money and start funding us, put our finances on actual sustainable footing, and then we can go forward in terms of better public services on delivering the wages that workers deserve.
Does anybody else have anything?
I would just maybe put a slightly more positive spin on the in terms of the UK government's position in relation to that. But it is about continued advocacy from the executive for a more sustainable funding model. We saw that in terms of the fiscal floor being instituted recently for before Christmas. I think the Secretary of State was very ham-fisted with regards to his response to that. I think, for example, we saw today, and this is only a first step, because I recognise that two teachers' unions have accepted the pay proposal on the table from Paul Given, the Education Minister. That's a start. But for example, we have seen that consistent resourcing issue with regards to our public sector pay, for example, with the starting salary for teachers, for example, lagging behind our UK counterparts in the Republic of Ireland. We see it's the same with public spending funding per head, for example. I think there needs to be a recognition on the part of government that the needs in Northern Ireland, for example, as the region that we are, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of where our economy stands, our output, for example, our skills base, isn't the same. We're not necessarily competing on an equal basis with London and the South East, for example. And I think there's sometimes a Whitehall mentality to say, well, we've thrown money at it so they can take the money and they can be happy with it. And the government will often boast about they've invested this or they've invested that, but it really is about that equitable, proportionate funding that is directed towards our needs here. And I think it's about a consistent effort on the part of executive parties to make that case to government and push for further improvements.
Yeah.
Just on the form again, for Will, that I like to do. Would you not consider your party's motion on the form just about consider the statutory committee with authority and active guidance in these matters?
That statutory committee, which should have been a good thing, that does bring forward the likes of institutional reform, has been ignored by the executive, and we needed to make the wording stronger. We needed to make the committee stronger. We need to have more input and more accountability for the executive to listen to the outcomes of that committee. It's not a stunt. Not reforming the institutions, making sure we have the basics of government is not a stunt. It's what people really need here. It's not even a want anymore. We cannot afford another collapse fiscally, or I think, people's emotional tolerance with our politics as a whole anyway. We need to reform how these institutions work so people can start having confidence in our politics again. It's not a stunt. I really, really want, and everyone, I think the majority of our population anyway, want our politics to go forward and have security that we're going to have a government advocating for us. And I think just to touch briefly on revenue raising, unfortunately, it allows us to take those tough decisions as we've been talking about. But we can go cap in hand to what is deranged Tory government and hope that they're going to be fair in funding. But I think what we are better to do for is advocate that we can revenue raise in a whole different way. But the way that we can have the security, the platform to do that, is to have our institutions at a very basic minimum working, and security that they're working. That's what a lot of people in Northern Ireland want. That's what the SDLP have advocated for, the Alliance Party too, for as long as they've been about as well. It was enshrined in the values of the Good Friday is taken into accountability as we go forward. We take account of the situation that is currently happening, and right now it's just not sustainable to keep going. Not a stunt, it's a need.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. It was really lively here working past committees, platform discussions, so during the night off for that. What I would say is, one of the things we often do talk about in politics is growth. We reached a peak in the protest in 2020. I'm sure that well, not everyone was right now, but a lot of people listening from growth before. We reached all ages. Peak in our protest in 2020. The actual statistics that given us forward. The real statistics of protest. I wonder, what is your own party's position for each of you on growth reform? And from your own view, would you kind of advocate for decriminalisation of the drug user? Would you support, as I say, working class buildings? People, everybody takes drugs, every background of person, every kind of background, for drug addicts from all of them. We're
this
I
just
wonder,
for
I wonder for all of you, would you advocate for your party be
I'd be very much.
support decriminalisation?
yeah, feel like it's like
We've been working with the Labour Party in the Republic and the SDLP on this as well. Fantastic campaign championed by Aaron O'Riordan, TD in Dublin, and I think he puts it the best as well, which is that the idea of drug decriminalisation is not just about decriminalising drugs, it's decriminalising the drug user. This is a social issue. It's a fantastic way of helping those working class communities which have been subjected to the drug gangs and drug culture as well. It's a way out of it. I think we look at Portugal as an example, but I think, yeah, I think that's the fundamental headline of it, is about decriminalising the drug user. That's what it's all about, and I couldn't support the policy more. I think the SDLP has been very clear on that with their support of the Labour Party's position on it.
Yep, I'll completely echo what my friend here said. I think the approach and the way we look at that needs to kind of change. I think a lot of people, you know, when it comes to drug users and people who have substance abuse and so forth, kind of just see it as, oh, you know, just addicted to whatever. But it realistically is a mental health problem, and it is it needs to be treated as such and viewed as such. So society in a whole needs to, you know, we need to kind of change our approach to it. You know, we shouldn't just brush them off. There's an actual issue there. It's you can see in the streets. You go down Dublin Road, for example, we see it all the time. And like the way we need to really approach it and approach it as a mental health problem and see that as a medical issue and deal with it as such, we should just brush it away.
Yeah, well, we just recently at our desk in November, we want a more compassionate approach. These people have problems, they have mental health problems. One of our MLAs, Miss Belfast, really have been champion the need for dual diagnosis service here in the north as well, in terms of people with mental health issues aren't getting actually suitable treatment for their drug problems and vice versa, so then they fall through the loop. So there is that practical level work going on at the minute. We need to be more compassionate to these people. It is a health problem. You know, for too long you're looked at as a scumbag, you're looked at as dirt on the street, you're looked at there's something wrong with you. These people need help. They need help through a health system. Criminalising them will not make them better. It will not make them on the road to recovery. We really have to have a serious conversation about where we go next.
Okay, time for one more, I think. So, yeah, at the back.
Yes, I think infinitely a better position. And I think, yes, Sinn Féin went and they spoke to Joe Biden and they gave him a good tell all. Already, you know, and I didn't see any change in the American attitude. But, you know, the SDLP, admittedly, a fairly small party from the north of Ireland, got a headline, a pretty substantial headline in the Washington Post, I think it was. That's making waves. Imagine if other parties had joined us in that boycott. I think we could have made an international wave on that, and we would have been able to make more attention for the issue than going and partying with American politicians, having a pint of Guinness, having a glass of champagne, and getting a few fundraisings in spare time while you're there. I think it was completely unproductive. It was done for personal reasons that they went over there. I think there was reasons for head of states like Michelle O'Neill, and Gelly and Leo Bradford to go and voice their electorate's opinion. Was there a need for a leader of an opposition party in the Republic to go? I don't think so. I think there would be more ways that parties that were going to America for the last 30 years and celebrating St. Patrick's Day stayed at home and made their values heard. We saw the SDLP made waves. We're a small party. It would have been great to see what if the bigger parties joined us on that. That goes for parties right across the island that went and partied in America and rubbed shoulders with American politicians.
I'm just going to come in on that really quickly. Headlines don't save lives. Headlines don't deliver dialogue. Headlines don't deliver peace processes. Going and talking with people does. And this press line from the SDLP trying to be down with the kids and all that, drinking Guinness and champagne and all, doesn't have the effect that they want it to. Dialogue is what saves people's lives. Ceasefires, ending the genocide of the Palestinian people. That's where we were. You might brush it off with champagne drinking and all, or Guinness or all that crack. We're here to do business. That's what we did. Mary McDonald and Michelle O'Neill used our platform to actually be a supply to the Palestinian people, and we'll continue to do that in America, in Britain, in the EU, wherever.
What makes the Sinn Féin talking with save lives?
Love that.
Take another question if anyone has one. Yeah, do. It's not for anybody.
Anyone?
It's not-
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's
Oh.
for anybody.
we're in terms of when sorry to jump in terms of being in terms of what's going to happen across the water, I think there probably is going to be a government change. I think the Labour Party are going to get into power, and we are obviously sister parties with that party, the SDLP. Now, do we support where they are currently on their position? No, they're not in a particularly great place politically, and they're not really reflecting the values that we hold in the SDLP. But I think as we go closer to this election, the polls are going to get tighter, and I think the Tories are going to do better than people expect. And I think SDLP politicians coming up from the north and having their voice heard by a Labour government will be very, very beneficial for the constituencies that hold SDLP MPs, and we'll be able to have that voice to make sure that we can make a deal, perhaps confidence and supply if it's needed, to bring more investment here and hopefully do improve the situations of revenue raising here, and we don't have to move to other situations, but also improve the ability for us to do different types of revenue raising, such as a wealth tax. But for me, what I would love to see an SDLP MP over advocating with the Labour government to do is have the conditions set out for what a border poll will look like. I find it very worrying that British Secretary of State can call a border poll at any point without any official considerations at point. That means they can call it at a time where it's favourable for them to for the UK to stay in, or vice versa, and that's just not democratically acceptable. So that's one thing that if we had the ear of a Labour Prime Minister, we could do in the Republic. You know, I think there's a fair chance that there could be a shake-up of government. It'll be all very interesting to see how the new, maybe it'll be Simon Harris, who knows, the new Taoiseach will do. But I think if there is a shake-up of government in the South, I think that there, from what the opposition are saying, there's going to be a lot of very different takes on politics down there. And a lot of it sounds very constructive. We want to work with them on that. And the likes of, I think what Conor raised earlier, a Citizens Assembly as the first priority would be a fantastic thing that we'd love to engage with as well.
In terms of a Labour government, I wouldn't hold my breath, because anything Keir Starmer said 5 years ago is backtracked on. So we'll wait and see the election, we'll wait and see the results, and then we'll actually wait and see what he does as Prime Minister and his government. In terms of the South, we want to lead government. We want to be, for the first time, we want to form a government of the left, which is progressive, which prioritises the issues that matter to ordinary people. That's housing, that's healthcare, that's education. That's finally a Southern government delivering on unity and putting the planning and preparations in place. For the first time in history, the people of the South have a decision. They either have another government or Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, probably supported by the Greens or some other minority party, or they have Sinn Féin. That's the opportunity people have. They have change, progressive change, left change, and that's what we go forward. In terms of the Taoiseach scenario now at the minute, people don't need a rearrangement of the deck chairs. They don't need this game of musical chairs. What they need is an election. People are fed up. House ownership has crumbled under Fine Gael. Children outside the GPO eat their dinner on sheets of cardboard. Homelessness, child homelessness has gone through the roof. People want change, and we're there to deliver.
I'd just say, in terms of the change of the Labour government in the UK, I think, particularly conversations that my party's had with Hilary Benn, the Shadow Secretary of State from Northern Ireland, he's very much indicated it would be a steady as it goes kind of approach, and very much not look to deviate from the cross-party consensus been established in Northern Ireland over 2.5 decades on that. As far as the potential for a Sinn Féin government in the Republic, I would have concerns in relation to how they settle into the role as an arbiter and the co-guarantor of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. And I think it will kind of be a moment of a litmus test, really, of Sinn Féin's ability to discharge those duties in a even-handed way, considering the people would make comparisons to the DUP's confidence supply arrangement with the Conservative government in 2017, but I really think this is an unprecedented scenario where you have a party that's constituted on an all-item basis that is in government and has substantial executive power, is both the co-guarantor of the Belfast Agreement and participant in the Belfast Agreement, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I just think for government, for new Labour government, I think that is needed. We need some new ideas in Westminster, and the Labour will be able to bring that. And then, and also just, I think the unionism could have discussions with Labour, maybe more change to Northern Ireland football, the Windsor Premier, and just without them and even fully new, Northern Ireland is more challenging there with the potential for single market access. How you get discussions like that maybe should have happened with Labour, and I think maybe we should have started doing that sooner, and that way we would order and we removed the need for a 2 year boycott. But then the government down the south, we were grant on all that, and it's quite concerning about I'd be a wee bit concerned just about what their involvement would be in the Ireland and how they can be. Say if there is a collapse to the executive, how can we have a Sinn Féin piece up and try and speak to Sinn Féin, the deputy leader of Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland, how's that going to work? And then I think what the Sinn Féin ideas like that.
And on that note, we're going to leave it. Thank you very much for being with us. Hope you all enjoyed it and enjoy the rest of your evenings.